The town of Evermere was the kind of place where time moved gently, where waves whispered to the shore and the streets smelled faintly of sea salt and old books. Tucked along its cobbled main street stood the Painted Page, a cozy book. Cafe, where paintbrushes shared space with poetry, and coffee came with handwritten quotes on every cup. It was in this quiet, sun-dappled corner of the world that Isla Montgomery arrived with a suitcase full of blueprints and a heart too tired to beat freely. She had come to Evermere to escape, to breathe, to forget. After 7 relentless years, designing skyscrapers in the city and enduring a broken engagement that had left her heart weary and guarded, Isla had finally chosen solitude over success. Renting a small seaside cottage for the summer, she planned to draw, rest, and perhaps feel something again. But even she didn't expect the town's warmth to begin thawing the cold places inside her quite so soon. It was a Monday morning, the sky powdered with soft clouds, when she stepped into the Painted Page for the first time. She hadn't meant to stay long, just a quick coffee before heading back to her drafting table. But the scent of fresh espresso and the low hum of an acoustic guitar playing in the background rooted her feet to the wooden floor. Shelves of books curled around the cafe like arms, and in the far corner, beside the tall windows, a man stood in front of a large canvas, painting with sure, fluid strokes. He wore a denim shirt speckled with colors and had unruly chestnut curls that moved every time he tilted his head. His fingers stained with reds and blues moved with a rhythm that made Isla pause. Something about the scene, the gentleness in his posture, made her want to watch longer. But her eyes drifted toward the empty seat near the counter, and as she moved forward, her bag brushed against a nearby easel, toppling it. Paint water splashed across the wooden floor, and worse, across the half-finished watercolor the artist had left drying on the table. Oh no, Isla gasped, immediately crouching down to gather scattered brushes and a dripping palette. I'm so sorry. The man turned, startled, and for a brief moment their eyes met. His were hazel, flecked with gold, warm and steady. He blinked, then broke into a half-smile, more amused than angry. That painting just became a collaboration, he said, kneeling to help her. Though I admit I hadn't planned on grayish-brown streaks in the sky. Isla flushed, mortified. I didn't see the easel. I wasn't watching where... It's all right, he interrupted gently. Happens all the time. Really? He chuckled. No, but you look like you need a pass. She couldn't help the laugh that escaped. Her soft and surprised. It had been weeks since she'd laughed, months maybe. The man offered her a towel and waved off her repeated apologies with a calm grace that made her feel oddly safe. I'm Leo, by the way, he said, wiping his hands. Cafe owner, occasional painter, and now ruined art rescuer. Isla, she replied, still clutching a damp paintbrush like a confession. I just moved into the cottage near the cliffs. Didn't mean to start my time here by destroying local artwork. He tilted his head, studying her, not unkindly, but like he was trying to understand something beneath her words. Well, Isla near the cliffs, he said with a teasing smile. You owe me a coffee. That's how art disasters are settled. Around here. She followed him to the counter, still apologizing. But he seemed unfazed, sliding 2 mugs her way and nodding toward the window seat. The view overlooked the ocean, where waves kissed the rocks like old lovers. They sat across from each other, steam curling between them, and slowly their conversation began to stitch itself together. She told him she was an architect sort of on pause, and he told her about the cafe, how it had once been his sister's dream before she passed away, and how he'd kept it alive for her. There was pain in his eyes when he spoke of her, but also love. Deep-rooted love. As the morning light shifted, so did something inside Isla. She felt herself settling not into the town, not yet, but into the conversation, into this man who laughed with his whole face, and listened like it mattered. They talked about books, favorite smells, childhood memories. She learned he painted by instinct, rarely planning, just feeling. She told him she hadn't drawn anything not tied to a deadline in years. You should, he said quietly, looking at her like she was some forgotten melody. Not for work, just for yourself. The words landed gently but deeply. Ila didn't know how to respond, so she sipped her coffee and looked out at the sea. Leo didn't push. He just sat with her in the quiet, as if understanding that some hearts needed time to speak again. By the time she stood to leave, hours had passed unnoticed. Thank you, she said, adjusting the strap of her bag, for the coffee. And for not being mad. Thank you for the unexpected color scheme, he said with a wink. Come back tomorrow. You can ruin another painting. She smiled, wider this time. Maybe I will. As she stepped outside, the breeze caught her hair, and the scent of the sea followed her down the street. She glanced back once, saw Leo watching her through the window, and felt something strange stir in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the soft beginning of something. Something that felt a lot like home. Ila Montgomery had always believed in clean lines, precise angles, and the logic of well-laid plans. It was how she survived her childhood in a fractured home, how she climbed her way to a top architecture firm in the city, and how she'd stayed sane after breaking off an engagement that had slowly drained her joy like a cracked foundation. Love, she decided, was too risky, too unstructured, too unpredictable, though things didn't leave. People did. Her days in the city had blurred into deadlines and dimly lit studio nights. Her ex-fiancé Mason had admired her ambition but never quite understood the way her heart beat behind blueprints. He had wanted her presence, not her purpose. And in the end, when he'd asked her to choose between the project of a lifetime and their engagement party, she had made the mistake of hesitating. He didn't wait for an answer. So she left. She packed her sketchbooks, her grandmother's worn recipe cards, and a lifetime of exhaustion, and drove until the skyline gave way to cliffs and the noise of the city faded into the lull of waves. Cottage she rented near Evermere's shoreline was simple, with peeling shutters and a view of the sea that caught the light just right at sunrise. It had creaky floors and a stubborn back door, but it was quiet, peaceful. Her first night there, she slept without dreams. The second, she woke early and walked barefoot to the shore. The wind tugged at her hair, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than tired. She felt still. Meanwhile, Leo Bennett's world was a canvas in constant motion. Where Ila chased precision, he embraced the unpredictable, the way color bled into water, the way wind moved light. His life was not without structure, but it pulsed with a freedom she had never known. Leo had grown up in Evermere, a child of the waves and woods, raised by his grandmother after his parents died young. He and his younger sister, Amelia, had once dreamed up the idea of a book cafe during summer storms, she with her nose always in a novel, he with paint under his nails. When she passed away in her early 20s from an undiagnosed heart condition, Leo had been shattered. But instead of letting grief devour him, he built something beautiful in her memory. The painted page became a sanctuary for locals, for tourists, and for his own healing. He'd never been good at planning. He was the type to paint over a finished piece if it didn't feel right, or close the cafe early to follow the light. Across the cliffs with a sketch pad in hand, people often called him whimsical, too easygoing, as if kindness and spontaneity were weaknesses. But Leo had learned that life rarely waited, so he didn't either. He gave freely, loved deeply, and believed that hearts, though fragile, were meant to be used. Since Ila's paint spill debut at the cafe, she had returned nearly every morning. Sometimes she stayed for hours, tucked into the window seat with her sketch pad. pretending not to notice when Leo brought her a warm scone or an extra napkin without asking. They hadn't spoken much after their first long conversation, but their quiet exchanges were filled with something unspoken soft glances, small smiles, and a strange ease that neither could name. She didn't quite know why she kept going back. Maybe it was the smell of cinnamon and sea air, or maybe it was the way Leo always looked like he belonged exactly where he was, brush in hand, laughter at the ready. Whatever the reason, she found herself rearranging her days around those visits. Leo, for his part, was intrigued by Isla's quiet presence. She was different from most visitors, reserved, observant, never asking for attention, yet impossible not to notice. She moved like someone carrying too much, but with a grace that made you want to shoulder it for her. He wanted to know what made her draw the way she did, soft strokes, haunting lines, the kind of sketches that looked like they were remembering something rather than creating it. One afternoon, after a particular loud storm had knocked the power out temporarily, the cafe became a candlelit haven. Leo brought out his backup generator, served drinks on the house, and played his sister's old record player by the window. Isla had lingered longer that day, and when she finally stood to leave, she handed him a folded paper. "It's nothing," she'd said quietly. When he unfolded it later, he found a sketch him, standing at the counter, laughing, a candle flickering between him and the stack of books behind him. It was so accurate, so alive, it nearly took his breath away. The next day, he hung the sketch on the wall beside Amelia's portrait. Isla didn't mention it again. Their worlds began to brush up against each other more and more. At the farmer's market, Leo caught Isla inspecting herbs like she was planning to grow her own garden. And when he teased her about it, she gave him a rare smirk and asked if he even knew how to cook. Later that week, he dropped off a basil plant with a note that said, "Challenge accepted." She responded with a loaf of sourdough and a drawing of the plant now labeled, "Leo's basil, thrives on teasing and light." Still, both were cautious. Ayla had spent too long controlling her world to let someone disrupt it easily. And Leo, despite his openness, had learned that people who didn't want to stay would eventually leave, no matter how hard you loved them. But Evermere had a way of working quietly behind the scenes. The town, with its rhythm of tides and community dinners and starlit festivals, began pulling them closer. Neighbors noticed. Mrs. Templeton of the bakery smiled a little too knowingly when Isla came in twice a week now instead of once. Even children at the local art class began asking if the book lady and the painter were married. They weren't, not yet. But something was shifting. One evening, Isla stood on the back porch of her cottage, wrapped in a knit blanket, watching. The sea turned gold beneath the sunset. She had her sketchbook open, but her hand was still. Her thoughts kept returning to the man who painted with the sunrise in his eyes and asked nothing of her but her presence. She didn't know what this was between them. She only knew that the silence she used to dread now felt warm when it came. With the sound of Leo's laughter from across the cafe, or the memory of him handing her a cup with her favorite quote scribbled on the side. Maybe, just maybe, this town was giving her more than space to breathe. Maybe it was giving her a reason to hope Dodd, and in his own small home above the Kaffa, Leo looked out at the same sea, wondering if Isla Montgomery would ever let him in. Not just into her routine or her mornings, but into the parts of her heart, still locked behind caution and past pain. He didn't know it yet, but their hearts, so different in tempo, so shaped by loss, were already aligning. Not with fireworks or dramatic declarations, but with every small choice to show up, to stay, to be seen. It was the kind of beginning that didn't shout. It whispered. And sometimes that was how the best love stories started. Every sunrise, and Evermere now felt like an invitation. Isla found herself sketching the cafe's sign-painted letters curling like waves before she even brushed her teeth. She'd rise early, pull on jeans and a sweater, and wander down the lane to the painted page, where Leo's silhouette was already visible through the window, cup in hand. Their morning settled into a gentle routine, a shared nod, a soft good morning, and the quiet comfort of knowing the other would be there. But even routines can spark surprises. One morning, as Isla carried her sketchbook inside, she spotted Leo closing the cafe doors behind him. "You'll catch a cold," she chided, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He waved her inside with a grin. "Emergency art meeting," he announced, lifting a large canvas from behind the counter. The painting was new in impression, of Evermere's cliffs at dawn, with two shadowed figures standing on the promontory. "Come see," he urged, guiding her around the counter. Isla's breath caught. The two figures were unmistakably them, her hair swept by an imagined breeze, his hand outstretched. The sky above was streaked in golds and pinks, and the sea below glimmered like scattered jewels. Though the faces were only suggested shapes, their bodies spoke of a quiet intimacy. "It's beautiful," Isla whispered, fingers hovering near the canvas without touching. Her heart fluttered at the thought of him painting their shared moments, moments she half expected to keep to herself. Leo watched her closely. "I've been working on it for days," he admitted. "Wanted to surprise you." His eyes held something unreadable hope, perhaps. Fear? Isla's pulse quickened. She glanced away before her expression gave too much away. They fell into an easy rhythm that week of shared creativity. On Tuesday, when a sudden rainstorm trapped them beneath the cafe's awning, Leo pressed a spare umbrella into her hand. She huddled beside him, and the world narrowed to the sound of rain, the rhythm of breathing, and the nearness of his shoulder. "Tell me about loss," he said softly, voice almost drowned by the downpour. Isla braced herself, but instead of retreating, she found the words. She told him about the engagement she'd broken, about how the ring he'd given her felt like a shackle more than a promise. Her cheeks burned as she spoke, but Leo said nothing except to nod and listen, his hand brushing hers when she faltered. And when the rain eased, she realized how safe it felt to be vulnerable beside him. On Thursday, Leo invited her to help him set up an outdoor display of his artwork for the town's annual art festival. He handed her stacks of framed sketches and asked her opinion on which pieces to show. They moved side by side along the cobblestones, testing angles and catching each other's eyes as they laughed over a wayward seagull that tried to steal one of the frames. "You have a good eye," Leo told her, voice low and sincere. "Architecture must have taught you that. And you have a knack for capturing the heart of this town," she replied, watching him step back to admire a painting of the harbor at dusk. In that moment, she realized her heart had already been captured, too, by the easy way he looked at life, by the kindness in his eyes, by the way he made her feel seen. As the festival night arrived, lanterns swung overhead, casting golden pools of light on the street. Leo led Isla past his booth, where the Evermere Dawn canvas stood proudly, to a smaller table hidden from view. There, he'd arranged candles around a stack of his sister's favorite poems, handwritten a looping script. "I thought, if you're going to help me celebrate this town, you should know this part of it too," he said, voice gentle. Isla reached out to touch one of the poems. Her fingers trembled on the paper as she read lines about love being a harbor and stormy seas. Tears prickled at her eyes. Leo placed a hand over hers, warm and steady. Before she could respond, fireworks boomed somewhere over the water, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Leo pulled her close, and for a heartbeat, Isla saw the world in kaleidoscopes of red and green lights. All around them, laughter and music wove through the night air, but the only sound she heard was her heart, stubbornly beating in time with his. That night, walking home under a sky still glowing from the festival, Isla and Leo shared a bench, overlooking the cliffs. They spoke in hushed tones about art, architecture, and afternoons spent dreaming. Leo admitted he'd always been afraid of opening himself to someone new. Isla confessed she'd retreated from love for fear of losing herself. As they talked, the distance between them shrank until it was gone, replaced by a closeness that made every breath feel urgent. Their first touch was tentative, a brush of thumbs as Leo handed her a flask of hot tea. Then, as the wind whipped around them and the sea whispered below, their fingers intertwined. Neither spoke, but in that simple gesture, everything changed. Romantic tension rippled through them both. Anticipation, longing, a fierce need to cross the line they'd danced around for so long. The next morning brought awkwardness, neither quite knowing how to greet the other. Isla arrived at the cafe early, clearing tables to avoid him at first. But her resolve melted when Leo slid a mug of coffee across the counter with a small pastry tucked inside. His eyes held the same warmth, the same invitation she'd felt. "Since day one, I want to see you," he said, voice husky with something deeper. "Not just here, but elsewhere." Isla's heart lurched. "Where?" He grinned. "Walk with me." He held out 2 tickets to the ferry that crossed to the neighboring island, where wildflowers grew in hidden meadows. They spent the day wandering paths lined with daisies, sharing stories about childhood dreams and favorite secrets. Leo taught. Isla had to set up a quick plein air painting station, and she showed him how to sketch basic architectural lines to capture a cottage in the distance. They fell into laughter and later silence, comfortable, charged silence that spoke of promises. Neither dared articulate out loud as the sun dipped low. They found themselves on a hill above the water. Leo set aside his brushes and turned to her, eyes shimmering with dusk. "Isla," he murmured. She stepped closer, breath catching in her throat. He reached up, gently tucking a loose curl behind her ear. The touch set her skin alight. Leo's gaze went to her lips, then back to her eyes. Time slowed, and Isla felt herself tipping toward something she couldn't resist. But as his hand hovered near her face, uncertainty flickered across her features. She began, voice trembling. Leo paused, concern and longing warring in his expression. "Tell me," she swallowed hard. "I'm still scared." His hand fell to her waist. "So am I." His honesty was a balm, and as the last light of day glowed behind them, they closed the gap mouths, meeting in a kiss that was gentle, hopeful, and filled with everything they'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, Isla rested her forehead against his. "I think," Leo's arms tightened around her. "Me too." In the glow of twilight, they stood together, hearts pounding in unison. The moment was neither grand nor dramatic. It was soft and real, the quiet promise of something lasting. Walking back across the ferry as night settled, they held hands, no longer hesitating, no longer wondering. The salt air wrapped around them like a blessing, and every star above felt like a witness to the beginning of their love's true ascent. Their chemistry, once a delicate thread of glances and smiles, had woven itself into something stronger. Trust, hope, and a thrilling anticipation of what tomorrow might bring. And though neither knew exactly where this journey would lead, they both understood that every step forward, taken together, would be where their hearts aligned. In the days that followed their kiss on the hill, Isla and Leo fell into a rhythm that felt less like falling and more like floating, gentle, steady, and wrapped in something they were both afraid to name too soon. There were no declarations, no grand labels, but everything had changed. The silences between them were no longer cautious, they were tender. Their glances lingered longer. Their laughter felt fuller, and each moment they spent together added another layer to something quietly beautiful. Isla still woke early and walked to the cafe each morning, But now Leo was often waiting for her outside, 2 cups in hand and a shy smile that never failed to warm her. Sometimes he'd walk her halfway home after her coffee and sketching sessions, and they'd pause by the cliffs just to watch the sea in silence. Other times, he'd invite her into the studio space behind the Cafe A place he rarely shared with anyone. Inside, the walls were lined with canvases at various stages of completion. Light filtered in through skylights, scattering across tables cluttered with brushes, dried petals, and open books. It smelled of citrus and turpentine. Leo guided her around the room like he was offering her pieces of his heart, his memories, his grief, his joy. She took it all in reverently, like walking through a museum where every painting whispered his name. One afternoon, he handed her a fresh canvas. "Paint something," he said. "I don't." "I haven't in years," she replied, instinctively backing away. "You don't have to be perfect," he said gently. "Just honest." So she did. Hesitantly, at first sketching light lines, then soft washes of gray and blue. It was a stormy shoreline, nothing polished, but when she stepped back, Leo looked at it like it was a masterpiece. "I see you in this," he said quietly. "Not just your skill, you." Isla swallowed past the lump in her throat. She couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her work and seen her instead of just her output. Their emotional intimacy blossomed slowly but deeply. They began sharing dinners, sometimes takeout on the porch, sometimes Leo's. Surprisingly good roasted chicken. Isla, in turn, baked lemon tarts and cinnamon rolls, recipes passed down from her grandmother. On one of those nights, after they cleaned the dishes together and sat beneath the string lights Leo had hung above the back patio, he turned to her and asked, "What was your dream?" "Before architecture, before the city." Isla was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I wanted to build homes for people who never had one, not just building safe places. Places that felt like belonging." Leo looked at her with a soft wonder. "You still could." She looked away. "Maybe." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "You're allowed to want it again, even if you had to bury it for a while." That night, he kissed her again, longer this time, slower. A kiss that asked nothing but gave everything. Isla held onto his shirt like she was anchoring herself, and Leo held her like he was promising not to let go. Their connection deepened, not just through words and touch, but through presence. Leo surprised her one morning with a small wooden box, carefully carved and painted. Inside were tiny folded notes, quotes, jokes, song lyrics. "Open one whenever the day feels heavy," he told her. "Or even when it doesn't." Isla spent an entire evening folding her own versions, tucking them into his backpack while he painted outside. When he found them, he sent her a text. "You just became my favorite muse. It wasn't perfect." Isla still wrestled with restlessness, still woke some mornings wondering if she was meant to go back to the city. Leo, for all his ease, had moments where he withdrew, nights when he stared too long at his sister's old photographs and didn't say much. But they gave each other space and came back stronger each time. One weekend, Leo took Isla on a hike to a hidden waterfall deep in the woods beyond Evermere. The trail was uneven and speckled with sunlight, and they talked about nothing and everything: childhood scars, irrational fears, dreams they never told anyone else. At the top of the climb, they found the waterfall, a curtain of clear water tumbling into a mossy pool. Leo reached for her hand. "Close your eyes." She did, feeling the mist on her skin, the wind in her hair, and the brush of his thumb against her knuckles. "What do you hear?" he whispered. "Everything," she replied. "And nothing, just ... peace." When she opened her eyes, he was already looking at her. "That's what you sound like to me," he said. The words undid something inside her. She stepped forward and kissed him, not because she was ready, but because she finally believed she could be. He held her like the moment was sacred. From that day forward, their bond felt unshakable. Leo started teaching an art class on Saturdays, and Isla volunteered to help. Watching him with children, gentle, encouraging, light-hearted, made her fall in love with him in a new way. He painted with his heart, but he taught with his soul. When the town announced the annual Moonlight Gala, a formal event hosted at the seaside inn to raise funds for local schools, Leo asked her to be his date. "You clean up well," Isla teased, smoothing down the collar of his dark shirt the night of the event. "And you're breathtaking," he replied, lips brushing her forehead. She wore a midnight blue dress that shimmered when she moved, her hair pinned back with a single pearl. They danced under fairy lights strung across the garden. The music was slow, the ocean just visible beyond the hedges. Leo held her close, one hand at the small of her back, the other clutching hers with reverence. "I haven't felt like this in a long time," she whispered. "Like what?" "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He pulled back just enough to meet her gaze. "You are." Later, as the crowd thinned and music faded, they walked the beach barefoot, shoes in hand. The moon was high, casting silver on the water. Isla turned to him, her voice quiet. "Leo, what are we?" He stopped walking. "We're two people who met by accident and became the best kind of possibility," he said. "But if you're asking if I'm in this for real, I am fully, completely." She nodded, emotions tight in her throat. "Me too." They kissed. Again, deeper this time, fueled not by curiosity but certainty. Love had crept into their hearts like sunrise soft, steady, undeniable. They didn't say the words yet, but everything in their eyes whispered them. They didn't need to rush because for the first time in a long time, they were building something worth waiting for. The summer air in Evermere had begun to change. The breeze turned crisper, the sun a little softer, and with it came a subtle shift in the world Isla and Leo had so carefully begun to build. Their days still carried laughter, long walks, and gentle touches, but under the surface, something unspoken began to stir. It started with a phone call. Isla was in her cottage, sketching the new reading alcove design. Leo had asked her to help plan for the cafe. When her phone buzzed with a familiar city code, she hesitated. Her past had been quiet lately, content to let her forget, but now it had found her again. "Isla." "It's Julia," said the voice on the line. Her old manager, the same one who had once told her she was made for skyscrapers, not cottages. "There's a new position opening," Julia continued, head of creative design. "We want you to come back. It's yours if you want it." The offer hit her like a wave, unexpected, undeniable, and far more complicated than it should have been. "We need someone who can think bigger than blueprints," Julia said. "And Isla, you're still that person. I know you are." After she hung up, Isla sat in silence, the sketchbook slipping to the floor. The room felt smaller than it had a moment before. She picked up her pencil again, but her hand wouldn't move. The thought of returning to the city made her chest tighten, and yet, wasn't this what she had always worked for? The kind of position most people only dreamed of. That evening, she didn't mention the call to Leo. She watched him from across the cafe counter as he arranged new art prints on the wall, his focus calm and steady. She told herself it wasn't the right time, that she needed to think, that she wasn't keeping secrets, just protecting the quiet they had. But silence, like cracks in concrete, can grow. Over the next few days, Leo noticed something shift in her. Her smiles felt distracted. Her sketchbook stayed closed. She canceled 2 of their morning walks and left the cafe early without her usual goodbye. He didn't push. He had learned to give space. But the ache in his chest was real. One morning, while she was helping him hang lights in the cafe window, her phone buzzed again. Leo glanced at it instinctively, just a flick of the eyes, and saw the name Julia, design firm. He said nothing, but later, when Isla stepped out to take the call in private, he turned back to the wall and realized the lights didn't matter. Not if they were being strung between hearts. That night, Leo stood on the beach, watching the tide pull away from the shore. He thought about Amelia, about the way she used to say, people are like tides. Some stay, some return. But some, they drift. He didn't want Isla to drift. He just didn't know how to hold on without making her feel trapped up. Meanwhile, Isla sat on her cottage steps, staring out at the moonlight. The job offer haunted her like a ghost whispering of everything she had once dreamed of, everything she had walked away from. And Leo was becoming everything she never knew she needed. But what if this version of herself, the one who painted and baked and lingered in cafes, was only temporary? What if she left and found herself again? Or worse, lost him in the process? The next day, unable to hold it in any longer, she told him. They sat outside the cafe, the sea wind tossing her hair, the silence stretching between them. It's a creative director role, she said, her voice trembling. It's everything I used to want. Leo nodded slowly. And now? I don't know, she whispered. I thought I did, but then I met you. And Evermere became something I didn't plan for. He looked at her, his eyes unreadable. So what are you going to do? I haven't decided. He nodded again, quieter this time. Do you want me to tell you to stay? She swallowed hard. Would you? I want to, he said honestly. But I won't, because if you do stay, I need to know it's because you want this life. Not just me in it. The words pierced through her. He was right. And it made it hurt all the more. In the days that followed, the distance grew. Not in geography, they still saw each other, but in hesitation. In the way their conversations tiptoed around the future. In the way their hands reached for each other, then stopped just short. One night, rain began to fall unexpectedly. Isla, already halfway home, turned back toward the cafe without thinking. By the time she arrived, drenched and shivering, Leo was already closing up. He opened the door before she could knock. You're soaked, he said, reaching for a towel. So, are you? She replied, noticing his damp curls. They stood in the silence of the cafe, rain drumming above them. The tension that had built between them finally broke. I don't want to lose this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then don't walk away, he replied, stepping closer. But if you have to, I need to know I didn't hold you back. Her eyes brimmed with tears. You don't hold me back, Leo. You hold me together. He touched her cheek. Then why do I feel like I'm already watching you go? She leaned into his touch, the ache in her chest too much to hold in. Because I'm scared, she whispered, of losing myself, of choosing wrong, of regretting everything again. Leo pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. Then stay scared, he said softly. I'll stay with you in the fear. They stood like that, wrapped in silence and the sound of falling rain. But even as their bodies clung together, their hearts were quietly bracing for the choice that still had to be made. The rain had stopped, but its echo lingered on the cobbled streets of Evermere and the scent of damp earth, and most of all, between Leo and Isla, they hadn't spoken about the job offer since that night. Not directly. Instead, they danced around it in half-finished sentences and careful smiles. The cafe still buzzed with morning light and warm laughter, but underneath, everything felt delicate. Like one wrong step might shatter what they had. Built. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Wednesday. Slipped through Isla's mail slot in an envelope marked confidential. A final offer. Salary, relocation assistance, a personal note from Julia urging her to return. The team needs your voice. Again, Isla Dot, she stared at it for hours, her fingers tracing the embossed logo. In another life, this would have been everything. Now it felt like a mirror she was afraid to look into. That evening, she walked the long way to the cafe. The sun was setting, streaking the sky in deep oranges and purples. Evermere glowed like a dream. She found Leo at the counter, his hands flour-dusted, sleeves rolled high, humming an old melody under his breath. When he looked up and saw her face, he knew. She laid the letter on the table between them. They want an answer by Friday. He nodded once. And do you have one? I'm trying to find it. He sat the rolling pin aside and came to sit across from her. What do you feel when you read it? Guilt, she said quietly. Fear, a bit of pride and confusion. Do you feel hope? She looked up, eyes uncertain. I don't know. He held her gaze. You don't owe them anything, Isla. Not your peace. Not your future. Not your heart. I owe myself a chance to make the right choice. Leo's voice was soft, steady. And what does your heart say? She hesitated, and that pause spoke volumes. I'm afraid it's saying two different things. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on her window ledge, the sea whispering in the distance, memories rolling in like waves. Her life in the city had been loud, sharp, full of movement. But it had also been empty in ways she never acknowledged. Here in Evermere, life was slower but full. Full of mornings that smelled like coffee and salt air. Full of laughter, of healing, full of Leo. And that was the problem, wasn't it? Evermere was full of Leo. What if she needed to know who she was without him before she could love him fully? Thursday came. She stayed in her cottage most of the day, making a list pros and cons, dreams and regrets, truths and lies, she told herself. And when the clock struck 5, she realized something that terrified her. She didn't need the job. She just needed to feel in control again. She walked to the cafe with a single folded note in her hand. Leo was wiping down the counter, the late sun casting long shadows across the wood. He looked up, saw her face, and stopped. I made my decision, she said, her voice shaking. He set the cloth down slowly, his jaw tight. Okay, she handed him the note. He unfolded it, read it silently, then looked at her. You're going? She nodded, her throat tight. For a while, she whispered. Not forever, just enough to know I'm not running away from myself. Leo stepped back like he'd been struck. You don't have to do this to prove anything. I do, she said, tears brimming. Not to anyone else. To me. I need to know if what I'm building here is mine or something that I borrowed from you. The pain in his eyes broke her. I love you, Leo. He didn't look away. Then why does it feel like you're saying goodbye? Because I'm scared, she admitted. But I promise this isn't the end. He let out a long breath. I can't ask you to stay. I wouldn't want you to, she said, her voice cracking. But I need to go, just for now. He nodded, not because he agreed, but because he loved her enough to let her find her way. The next morning, she left out not with grand farewells or dramatic tears, just with a suitcase, a notebook, and a kiss that lingered far longer than words ever could. Leo stood on the steps of the cafe, watching her walk down the coastal road until she disappeared from view. He didn't chase her. He didn't call out. He simply whispered into the wind, "Come back to me." And Isla, even as her train pulled away from the station, heard it dot in her heart. She whispered back, "I will that winter pass like a soft breath across Evermere." The town shimmered under blankets of frost, the ocean turning a deeper shade of blue. Tourists thinned, leaving behind the heartbeat of the village, those who knew its quiet rhythm. Leo kept baking. The cafe remained the town's warmest corner, always glowing, always welcoming. But those who truly knew Leo could tell he was different. Kinder, perhaps, quieter. His smile still reached his eyes, but only just. He moved like a man waiting, though no one dared ask what for Dot each morning. He set out 2 cups of coffee at the small table by the window. Every evening, he packed away just one. Some days, he'd reread the note Isla left behind. Other days, he buried it deep in his drawer, trying not to feel the empty space beside him. She called sometimes. Short conversations full of updates and laughter, but never promises. She was thriving, pitching meaningful stories, working with a new editor who respected her voice. But Leo knew her well enough to hear the hesitation in her joy. She was finding her footing, but she hadn't found her home. Spring bloomed. The daffodils returned to the fields, and with them a shift in the air. Leo felt it before he saw it, a warmth, a stirring, like the first golden ray of sun after a long gray stretch. On a Tuesday morning, as the town yawned awake, Leo opened the cafe's front door and froze. There she was. Isla. Hair tousled by the wind, suitcase in hand, a soft, uncertain smile playing on her lips. He didn't move. He barely breathed. "I forgot how blue the sky is here," she said quietly. He stepped forward, heart pounding. "You came back," she nodded. "Because I finally realized Evermere isn't just where I healed. It's where I belong." Leo searched her face. "Are you sure?" Her eyes filled. "I went to find myself, but I realized I was never lost. I just hadn't found you yet." He laughed, disbelieving. "You're really here?" She stepped closer, dropping her bag. "I'm really here. And this time, I'm not leaving." His arms wrapped around her like the tides coming home. She melted into his embrace, the space between them vanishing like it had never existed. They stood like that for a long time, 2 people no longer searching, no longer waiting, just being together. Inside the cafe, the coffee still steamed. At the window table, 2 cups. As if time had been waiting. Later, they sat across from each other, hands intertwined. "I kept your favorite seat empty every day," he said. "I know," she whispered, "and I kept dreaming of this place every night." They talked about the months apart, the lessons learned, the love that never faded. Isla told him about her final article, a piece about finding strength not in running, but in staying, in building a life with both feet planted. "You were always strong," Leo said. "You just needed to believe it." She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I believe it now. And I believe in us." They watched the sunrise together, the sky painted in soft gold and blush. A fresh start, a new chapter. A few weeks later, the cafe held a quiet celebration. Not for an engagement or wedding, just for love found, lost, then found again. Evermere glowed. And in the back corner, beneath fairy lights and laughter, Leo leaned in and whispered, "You were never a visitor here, Isla. You were always home." She kissed him gently. "Then let's build forever starting today." And they did, not in grand gestures, but in the everyday. Morning coffees, shared books, sunset walks by the sea, and laughter during storms and quiet comfort on hard days. In knowing looks, soft smiles, and hands that never let go again. Hearts had finally aligned, not by chance, but by choice. And in Evermere, their love story wasn't just remembered.